Shalom Aleichem, everybody. We're up to Shevuos Daf Chaf Vav Amud Aleph, the top line. I love when that happens, when you're mamish up to the top line of that daf. Rabbi Shmuel Oimer Eino Chayev Elo Osed Lav. The Mishnah said that when you make a Shevuos Bitoy, Rabbi Shmuel says you're only chayev if you make it in future tense. Oichel, loy oichel, because the lashon pasuk is lahora or lahetiv. It's future tense. Tan Rabbanon says the Gemara. We learned in the Brayso lahora or lahetiv ein le'advar shesh ben rava tova. Oh. If you go with the literal wording of the pasuk, l'chayra, it should only be something which has a ra, which means I'm not going to eat, I'm going to refrain, I'm going to hurt myself, or hatova, I'm going to pleasure myself, I'm going to eat. That's what the Torah is saying. Lahira lahetiv. She'ein ben arava tova minayin. How do I know? Even if it's not ra and not tavo, it's nishtaher, nishtahin. It's a mutual act, a mediocre act, which is also a problem. So it says a klal of nefesh kiseshava. It sounds like any shvuah, not just lahar lahetiv. So yeah, lahar lahetiv sounds only rar toiv, but nefesh kiseshava, the stom of kiseshava includes any type of shvuah. Only laba. I only know if it's future tense. L'sha'over minayin. How do I know it's also l'sha'over? Even if it's past tense, achalti or lo yachalti. Tamud leimer l'choil asher yivata adam b'shavua. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. This is what the Heilige Tanna Rabbi Akiva holds. Rabbi Akiva holds that you're chayiv in any type of Shevuos Bita, whether it's labo, l'sha'ovar, dvarim sheyesh ben arava tova, or dvarim she'ein ben arava tova. B'shmol emir lahiru lahetiv l'haba. No. Look at the pasuk, look at the words. It's literal. Lahara lahetiv, it means future tense, not l'sha'ovar. Amalei Rabbi Akiva said, "In kain ein l'dvarim sheyesh ben arava rava." So if you're going with the literal wording of the pasuk, then it should also be only stuff that is tov and ra. How do I know if it's something like I'll throw a pebble into the sea, which is not tov or ra? Then how do we know that it's also an issue? You're chayiv on that. Omar loy. So Rabbi Shmuel said, "Meriba akasav shteitecha hapasuk ariba l'chol hashivat adam b'shvuah." That includes it. Omar loy. So Rabbi Akiva answered, gotcha. Meriba akasav lakach. If you see that the Torah is marba, a type of Shevuah that is not included in the literal wording of Lahar Lahetiv, so too, you can be marba the Lasha'avar as well. And Riba Kosav Lakach, Riba Kosav Lakach. Asks the Gemara, Shaper Ka'amal Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva has a tremendous time on Rabbi Shmuel. He says, once you're darshaning from L'chol HaShivata Adam B'Shvuah to include Dvarim She'ein Ben Arav HaTava, so include the Sha'avar also. So the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So the Heilige Amoyre Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabbi Shmuel sheshimesh es Rabbi Nechunya ben Akona. Rabbi Shmuel's Rabbi was Rabbi Nechunya ben Akona. Shahoye doirish es kol haTorah kula b'chlal prat. Ihu nami doirish b'chlal prat. So he darshans also this pasuk b'derech of klal prat. Rabbi Akiva sheshimesh es nachamish gamzu shei doirish kol haTorah kula b'riba amiyat. Ihu nami doirish riba amiyat. Now we're going to explain. Says the Gemara, "My Rabbi Akiva the darsha buyim u'utei." Where is Rabbi Akiva who says they have to darshan the Torah b'derech riba amiyat? Right? What does riba amiyat mean? It just means it's a different way of klal prat. Riba amiyat means that when you have a general statement in the Torah, then you have a specific statement in the Torah, followed by a general statement, then really you include all of whatever the general statements include, except for one case, the least likely case to be included. That's what riba amiyat and riba mean. If you do klal prat klal, right, it's the same setup in the Torah, right? Same wording, general, specific, and general, but the specific limits or shapes what's included even in the general. So it's more limiting when you go with klal prat klal. So the Gemara says, how do I know that Rabbi Akiva is darshaning riba in the Tanya? Oy nefesh kis shava riba. The Torah says nefesh kis shava, that's a riboy, right? Shevuos stam. It doesn't say exactly what kind of shvuah you made. Lahar lahetiv miyat. When it specifies lahar lahetiv, that's a miyat. L'choil hashivata adam chazev riba. When it mentions again l'choil, that's another riboy. So you have a case of riba miyat riba hakoil, right? My riba kol mili. Everything, any type of shvuah. And my miyat, what's the least likely case of a shvuah to be included in shvuas bitoy? That's what you mamayit, which is miyat dvar mitzvah, to swear on a dvar mitzvah, right? And there's a svara to that. To swear on a dvar mitzvah is the least likely shavua to be chal. If it's nishba levatel sa mitzvah, you can't be mevatel the mitzvah, right? You're already mushba to put on tefillin. You can't say Shevuos laniach tefillin. And also, even if you say Shevuos shaniach tefillin, it's you're already mushba v'oimet. It's already you already have a shvu on it. So therefore, that's the miyat according to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel, the darish klal prat klal darish klal prat. Where do you see that? Oy nefesh kisi shov alavate b'sv'sayim klal. It says in the Torah the same pasuk, right? Kisi shov has the klal. It generalizes every kind of shvuah. And then you have Lar lahit of prat. And l'choy l'shivat adam chazav v'kolal. So you have klal, a prat a klal. You have a prat sandwiched in between the two klalim. So iyatadan elkan prat. The reason why the Torah is sandwiching the prat in between the klals is to give you an idea of what kind of klal is included. Iyatadan elkan prat. Maha prat mefurish lahaba. Just like the prat, when the Torah specifies the shvuah in Lar lahitev, it's specifying it b'derech of lahaba, which is future tense. Avkol, so to any shavua that's in the klal has to be similar to the prat in the sense that it's lahaba. Asks the Gemara, Hani klal lasuya afilu dvarim sheben erova tova, and the klal is adding. The Gemara is not a kasha. The Gemara is just explaining. Hani klal lasuya afilu dvarim sheben erova tova. The klal is including even stuff that is not ra or toiv, like throwing a pebble into the sea. Hani prata. And the prat is limiting that only stuff that is lahaba, but l'sha'avar, even if it fits ra and tava, right, that doesn't work. It has to be lahara late, it has to be lahaba. Asks the Gemara, so once you have an option to limit one and expand the other, so why are you doing it in such a way? Maybe do it the opposite way. In other words, maybe say that just like lahara lehetiv is dvarim sheyesh ben arov atava, so to the klalim has to be dvarim sheyesh ben arov atava. Say that that's the limitation. That has to be rov atava. But l'sha'avar is not a limitation. Yeah, how do you know this is go this way, go the other way? We are saying that it has to be something which is similar to lahar lehetiv. Mishe isur mishum b'yachal devaroi yatzazazu she'ein isurai mishum b'yachal devaroi elo mishum Balta Shakru, right? The liyachal dvaroi is only something which is future tense. It's similar to Allah Har Lehetiv. Future tense is liyachal dvaroi. Liyachal dvaroi means don't go back on your word. Don't make your word chulin. That's only possible lahaba. I say I'm going to do something for you. I'm not going to do something for you, right? Then I can go back, renege. Is that an English word, Rocky? Renege?
I think so.
Yeah.
Renege, something like that. Close enough.
Sounds good. Yeah. So whenever you have a case of liyachal devaroi, which is similar to lahetiv, that is going to be included. In other words, that's what it needs to be lahaba. But if it's l'sha'avar, that's l'shashakru, that's a whole different vibe. It's a whole different lav, and therefore we're mamayit that. Again, so we're mamayit what's less likely to be included in the pasuk. What's less likely to be included in the pasuk? Anything that's not mishum b'yachal dvar, something which is mishum b'tashakru, which is l'sha'avar. Rav Yitzchak bar Ravin Omar Makra, Ritzchak says, Torah says, Oy nefesh ki zishol vat b'susayim. You know how we know that you have to be lahaba? According to Rabbi Shmuel, it's because it says, Tishava levate, misha shvua kodemes labitoy, veloy shabitoy kedemes l'shvua. Only the shvua comes before the bitoy and not the other way around. Yotzazeh, achalti v'lo echalti, sha'amaisa kodim l'shvua. When the maisa is before the shvua, that doesn't fall into the category of nefesh kisishava levate, right? Because the action was already done. The bitoy is before the shvua. The maisa is before the shvua. So here, the pasuk itself is insinuating that only lahaba is included in the parsha of shvuas bitoy, but not l'sha'avar. Okay. So again, just to summarize, we have a basic machlokes b'shal Rabbi Akiva. Shevuos l'sha'avar, by Shevuos bitoy, does it work or not? And the Gemara says that the machlokes depends on how you darshan the Torah, whether it's riba and miyat and riba, that's Rabbi Akiva's drasha, or it's klal prat klal. And here, Rav Yitzchak bar Oven has another drasha according to Bishmol because it says nefesh kisi shova levate. You have to have shavua kodim l'maisa, but l'sha'avar is maisa kodim l'shavua. Ton Rabbanon. Steht in the Torah, anything that a person will articulate with a shavua. So we darshan ha'odam b'shavua. the person has to be conscious as he's making the Shevuah. Right? Rashi says, She'odam b'shas Shevuah. You have to be a mensch b'shas Shevuah, which means she'eli by olav. It's a beautiful expression. That you're, what is it called? An odam b'Shevuah. Odam is your consciousness, your awareness, your mindfulness. That's the odam. Ha'odam b'Shevuah. You have to bring your mindfulness, your awareness, your consciousness into the Shevuah. Prat la'onus. That comes to exclude a case of einus. Right? In other words, when you made the Shevuah, you were missing some of the details or some of the facts that you're making the Shevuah about. So you're not fully present and conscious at the time you're making the Shevuah, and we'll see the Gemara is going to elaborate in a moment. That is not subject to Shevuah's bitoy. V'nelam, state the term v'nelam, prat lemezid. What does nelam mean? You're in a forgetful state. When do you bring a carbon on the aveira of Shevuah's bitoy? If you're a shoygig, but not if you forgot, but not if you were mezid. Right, we had the other day, that there is one case of a carbon that brings of Shevuah that brings a carbon b'mezid. Right, that's Shevuah se'edus. Guy says Shevuah she'ein yedei lecha edus. He would bring, right, he would bring even b'mezid. But here, a regular Shevuah's bitoy, it's only b'shaygig, v'nelam. Because the Gemara dashes, because there's no v'nelam by Shevuah se'edus, there's no word of v'nelam by Shevuah se'edus. V'nelam prat b'mezid, memenu shenis alma memena Shevuah. You forgot about the Shevuah. Yochel shenis alma memena chayfetz. Right? What about if you forgot about the chayfetz? Let's say you made a Shevuah. Shevuah shelo oichel loaf of bread zu. You're not going to eat this loaf of bread. So if you forget about your Shevuah and you eat it, you made the Shevuah, and then you bring a carbon oil of a yared b'shaygig. But if, let's say, you remembered you made the Shevuah, but you forgot the chayfetz, you forgot that this was the kicker you made it on. That's helam chayfetz. That wouldn't be chayav a carbon oil of a yared. How do we know that? B'Shevuah v'nelam. You have to forget that you made the Shevuah, not the chayfetz you made it on. Al helam Shevuah chayav and chayav helam chayfetz. Okay, now the Gemara is going to elaborate on this brisa. Omer mar. Ha'odam b'Shevuah prat la'onus. Heichadami. What's an oinus? We're coming to exclude an oinus in the case of Shevuah. Says the Gemara Kedr of Kahane v'Ravasi. Ki havakaimi mekam derav. They were Talmidim of Rav. Right? Interesting. I don't know if you remember this, Rocky, but Rav Kahana was not a Talmud in the way Abaye was a Talmud of Rabbah. He was a Talmud of Rav, he was Talmud Chaver.
Talmud Chaver, right.
Talmud Chaver, Gemara Sanhedrin.
Wait, is that the Gemara Sanhedrin?
The Gemara Sanhedrin. Also the Gemara Baba Basra talks about that when Rav was Shasik, when Rav Kahana asked him a kasha, right, Rav was Moida. But when Abaye asked the kasha and Rabbah was Shasik, then Rabbah just ignored him. And Tosfos says what's the difference? Because Abaye was a Talmud that needed Rabbah. Rabbah was the one who Mamash taught him everything. But Rav Kahana was Talmud Chaver, and therefore, when Rav Kahana asked and Rav was quiet, it's probably because he should have answered him, right? He's a Talmud Chaver, and so if he was quiet, he probably agreed with him.
Abaye and Rabbah both went from Rabbah.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is how Rav Kahana's relationship is characterized with Rav in a few places. But Rav Kahana Rav Asik have a kaim and Rav. Interesting, they would hear a shiur from Rav, and then they would argue. Mar Rav. One would say, I swear Rav said this. It's like Chazar Shashir, like when we learned to Pesach with Rav Meir Stern. So like we had like Chazar Shashir, like an hour of reviewing the shiur. Everybody would argue, no, the Rishiva meant it this way, the Rishiva meant that way. The Rav, no, he said Pshat Rav this way. I swear he said this way, yeah? Mara Mishwuz Dochi Amarav.
The way Zikr has it is they're swearing that the general said it like this.
Oh, I love that.
This
Uh-huh.
Chafaf is a coup, a military coup.
Ooh, that's great. What a great simon.
I swear that General
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that.
Shvuenhauer. They made it like a Shavuot.
Oh, how can you forget this? You can't forget this. This is amazing.
Top notch.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah, we'll bring this back later.
Okay, very good. It says the Gemara, so if Rav Asi would stand up in front of Rav, and Rav gave shiur, each one would swear that Rav said like he understood. So when Rav came back the next day, they both asked him, says, Rebbe, who'd you say like? He said like one of them. Oh, so the other Amira said, Oy bazoi, kum tachois, Amalei doch ano b'shikr shtaboy, Oy vayvoy, made a shur b'sheker? Amalei no, Libach ansach, you were an oinus. Yeah. Because you believed at the time, Rashi says, you believed you were making a an honest Shevuah. And therefore, that's prat la'oinus. You know what's really interesting is that Tosfos asks, brings a few different Gemaras, but in the Gemara in Gittin, the Gemara talks about a woman that somebody gave her a pikadon, money. And she put in the flour, she forgot, then she made a piece of bread, a loaf, and she gave it to an... Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah. Wow.
There we go.
Zichru?
Yeah, that case. It talks about the shiur. She made a shiur never to eat
Yeah.
the bread again.
This is Rocky. One of these days we got to turn the camera to Rocky. This is amazing.
Zichru.
Zichru.
You got to give a shout out to Zichru, not me.
Yeah.
I don't even have good of a memory.
Well, there's room for both. There's room for both. There's room for both.
Go.
So anyway, so the Gemara says that she said, Yehenna sam hamovis ba'achad mebanel, that she cursed, made a Shevuah, and she was takanenash, that if I took from it, Yehenna sam hamovis, then that one of her sons should die. So why do you say libach ansach? She believed she was telling the truth. She didn't know. She forgot about it. So just like one of these Amiroim, Tosfos asks, what's the difference? So pashtus, I mean, one could interpret and say that the einish over there wasn't so much of the Shevuah. She cursed. She said something really bad, and that carries weight. That carries power with somebody, even if they don't mean it.
Yeah.
We saw in Makkah, right? That it has power. So it could be that's that. But Tosfos doesn't answer that. Tosfos says something which is really just as fundamental, if not more. Tosfos says when it comes to mammon, then we don't say libach ansach. Why not? Because you knew that you're going to have to swear if you lose it. So you should have been much more careful. And so the gabi mammon shani de mekara havalo lamedik shesoifa level leishvua im tavdenu. So for you to just blurt out a Shevuah, that's irresponsible. You should have been more thorough, more careful, because you should have anticipated this kind of situation. So it's use it with use the heter of libach ansach. Tosfos says carefully. Doesn't always apply. Says the Gemara, v'nela mimenu. We said v'nela mimenu shenes'alom mimenu Shevuah. Yochash amen chayfetz amalei b'shvuah v'nelam, mimenu alam shvuah chayev v'en chayev alam chayfetz. Shvuah v'nelam mimenu alam shvuah chayev v'en chayev alam chayfetz. Okay, so that's the story. So there, we just ended with the last part of that brisa that you only chayev the carbon if you forgot about the shvuah that you made, but if you remember the shvuah and you forgot that this is the kicker you made it on, then you're still chayev. Machaku alay b'marava. So in Eretz Yisrael, they heard this statement and they laughed. Machaku. Sounds like they mocked it. Yeah, Bishleim Shevuah Mishkachas la Beloy Chayfetz Gegoin the Omar Shevuah Shla Eichel Paschiten Iksovar She'Eichel Ka'Omar the Shevuah Se Inchi Chef Tzedachir. I have a case where you forget the Shevuah, right? And you remember the Chayfetz you make it on, right? You make it on a Paschiten, but you don't remember what kind of Shevuah you made. You made Shevuah Shla Eichel, then you ate it. You thought you made a Shevuah Shla Eichel. Okay, so you forgot about the Shevuah, and then you bring a carbon oil of the yard on that. So that's Taka Shayach. Elo chayfetz beloy Shevuah. What has been Helam chayfetz without Helam Shevuah? Heichadami. How do you have even such a case where you forgot on the chayfetz? You got the chayfetz you made it on, but you remember the Shevuah. Heichadami. Kigoin the Omer Shevuah shlo eichel paschiten iksover shal sa'orim ka'amar, and he thought that he said sa'orim the Shevuah sedachelei, that he remembers the Shevuah and chefza inchi. And he forgets about the chayfetz, right? Because he made it about paschit and he thought he made it about so'irim. So the Gemara asks, it's nice. It's that's all words, semantics. Why? Because given the chavtza inchi, once he forgets the product or the type of bread he made the Shevuah on, right? Haina helam Shevuah. That's a case of helam Shevuah because that's part of your Shevuah, right? So if you're saying Shevuah shelo eichel paschitin and you think you meant pasa'or and you end up eating paschiten, then what did you forget? You forgot the words of the Shevuah. That's Halam Shevuah. So how is it shaykh to have Halam Chayfetz? Right? It's just a technical issue. You never have Halam Chayfetz and Halam Shevuah. As soon as you have Halam Chayfetz, then that affects the way you remember the Shevuah. That's why they were mocking it. Okay, says the Gemara, Elam Rabbi Loza Dovada Achasi. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah. Can't find the case of Halam Chayfetz without Halam Shevuah. Masker Flor Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef asked, Alma chayfetz b'loy shavua loy mishkachas la. So ibazoi, you're telling me chayfetz b'loy shavua. You don't have a case for that. V'mishkachas la k'indam shavuos lo eichel paschitin. You have a case. Why? You said shavua, I'm not going to eat paschitin. V'hoishit yodel asal little pasairin. And you mindlessly, you remember the shavua, but it wasn't just like, hey, stretch your hand out and you think that the basket you're taking the bread out of has a basket of pasairin. Also biyodoi shalchitin, and really, without realizing, you're taking a pas shalchitin, which is what you made the shavua on. Ksovar sa'irimi, and you're still thinking it's sa'irim. Va'achla dishavua sidachirlei. You remember the shavua you made the entire time. Somebody would have said, "Hey, did you make a shavua? What kind of shavua did you make?" He says, "I made a shavua shloichel paschitin." Right? But the problem is, chaftu de loyodle. He's not aware that he's holding paschitin. He's thinking it's sa'irim. So it's not that he's missing in the shavua and remembering any detail of the shavua. He remembers all the details, exactly how he made the shavua. He's just not mindful of what he's holding. So there you have a chiluk between Helam Chayfetz and Helam Shavua. So the Gemara says, Amar le Abaye. So Abaye said, Klum b'chayvus lakarban el amay detofes biyodei. At the end of the day, why are you going to be mechayiv in the carbon? Because he's eating paschitin. So that's called Helam Shavua. That's called Helam Shavua. Because with regard to this pas, he thinks he didn't make a Shavua on this pas. So there's an element of Helam Shavua as he's eating this pas. So that's called Helam Shavua also. The carbon that he brings on this pas that he ate is a carbon because he thought he didn't make the shavua on this bread. It's called Helam Shavua. There's no chiluk between these two lashonis. Sometimes you find in the Gemara that the two lashonis just how to express it, what Abai is saying to Rav Yosef, but they're both the same idea. And the idea is that even in a case where you remembered the language of the shavua, every detail of that language, you just were unaware of what you took in your hand, that what you're taking in your hand is really paschit and you're violating the shavua, that's also called Helam Shavua, because saif, you are not realizing that this achila is violating the shavua. That's called Helam Shavua. For Rav Yosef Amar Lach, Rav Yosef says no. That's not so simple that it's Helam Shavua. Why? Kivan dechiyodole dechitenhu parish menei. As soon as he'll realize that this is paschitin, he'll immediately drop it. So Helam Chayfetzu. That proves that it's Helam Chayfetz, not Helam Shavua. It's just he's not aware of the Chayfetz. V'haraya, if somebody tells him this is chitin, it's not so iron, he would drop it. That's called Helam Chayfetz. Okay. So we have a machlokes Rav Yosef and Abaye in a case of Shevuos L'Oichel Paschitin, and you grab mindlessly sa'ir, not realizing that it's really chitin, right? And you eat it, whether that's called Helam Shavua or Helam Chayfetz. Okay, Boimanei Rav Nachman. Now Rav asked from the Nachman, Helam Zev Zeh B'yodei Mahu. What if you forgot both? Forgot you made a Shavua on chitin, and then you grab something and you think it's sa'ir and it's really chitin, so you're not aware of the chayfetz you grabbed, and you don't remember the Shavua that you made. How do you judge this case? Do you characterize it as Helam Chayfetz and you don't bring a carbon? Or you characterize it as Helam Shavua, right? And you bring a carbon. No. Soif. There's a Helam Shavua, and as long as you have Helam Shavua, you're chayiv. Whereas it says, Adarabba, Helam Chayfetz b'yodei poter. What do you mean? Go the other way. Soif, Helam Chayfetz. Ravashi Chazinon, here's the litmus test. Imach Shavua kaparish. If somebody reminds him that he made a shavua and he drops it, I'm sure the other chayiv. If they remind him that he's holding they don't mention the shavua, they just say, "Hey, you're holding paschitin," up, and he drops it. Then you realize that's Helam Chayfetz b'yodei poter. Klum parish mishavua ela mishum chayfetz. Klum parish mechayfetz ela mishum shavua ela loishnam. Why would he drop it if he realizes it's chitin? Because he remembers the shavua. So then it's Helam Shavua. Or when you tell him, you made a shvuah, why would he drop it? Teretz is because he's holding the chayfetz. Chayfetz is paschita now, he realizes. So it's both. Either way, if you remind him about the shvuah, he drops it, and you remind him about the chayfetz that he's holding, he drops it, They both have a little bit of each other, and therefore it's lo shna. And you have Helam Chayfetz. Since you have Helam Chayfetz as well as Helam Shvuah, he holds your potaf makarbon. What's a case? Wow, that's an interesting shaila. A case of a shoygig on Shevuas bitoy l'sha'ovar. Ida yoda mezedu. Vida lo yoda anasu. Once you told me the yaloch of ha'odem b'shavua, that I'm only chayiv on a shavua if I'm consciously aware of what I'm saying, so how do you ever have a Shevuas bitoy b'shoygig that you bring a carbon of a yored on a l'sha'avar? Why? What's a classic Shevuas bitoy l'sha'avar? Let's say you say, I swear I didn't have any gluten today, right? So, if you were aware at the time you made the Shevuah, ha'odem b'shavua, that you did, that's amazing. And if you didn't, if you're not aware, then it's missing an ha'odem b'shavua, that's an oinus. Right? Liba chansach. Because you believe you're making, it's like Rav Kahana and Rav Asi and Rav, right? They believe they're making an honest Shevuah. So once you introduce the idea of ha'odem b'shavua, right, prat la'onus, then you eliminated a possibility, a case of shigigas Shevuas bitul l'sha'avar. Amalei, so nachlet Rava, but oimer yedei ani sheshavua zu asura, aval eini yedeya im chayoven le'karban elav. Super interesting. Which means like this. Avada, he's aware. He's making a shvu. He says, I didn't have gluten, but he knows achalti. Right? He's saying, shvuah shlechalti, he knows achalti. So he says, amazing. Teretz says, no, but he's lacking one piece of information. He's lacking the knowledge of whether you bring a carbon on such a type of shvuah or not. That's it. That's all he's lacking. And if you lack that piece of information, that's enough to classify, to characterize that kind of shvuah as a shaykik.
It's like a misasik. Similar. Very similar.
Yeah, but not really, because a misasik, you need to do a different action altogether. Here, you know exactly what you're doing.
Right. You lack one piece of information by the misasik also.
Misasik, you're lacking everything, because like a guy, what's classic case of misasik is
the flower.
Right, the flowers. So you think that, that's what you're saying, one piece of information, because you don't realize.
You know that Tailish is a malacha. You just don't know that this flower is attached to the ground. It's like you know you're not allowed to make a shua, but you just don't know if the shua is chayv karban. Maybe, I don't know, because we talk about misasik by shua.
No, I would say it's different. I would say it's very different because by a flower, when you take a flower out of the ground on Shabbos and you think that it's tolush, you b'chlal don't want to violate a malacha. Over here, you know you're violating a shvuah. You know it's also to make the shvuah sheker. It's shvuah sheker. You're doing it. You just don't know the consequence of it. Like, is there the consequence of a carbon on this or not? Which is a huge chiddush, because that would characterize it as an oinit. Wow, it's unbelievable. As a
you lack the knowledge of the consequence.
The consequence, but you know exactly what you're doing.
Right.
Where it says kaman, kamunbas. So this Tana, this member of Nachman was like the following Tana, Kamumbaz, the Omar Shigigas Karbon Shemashagaga. Right? If somebody does a malach on Shabbos, he knows it's aser. Right? He's taking out a flower that's mechuber lekarka. He's being tailish, kaitzer. One of the lamatas malachas, and he just doesn't know what's the consequence. Is he chayv carbon of that or not? If he's missing those details, it's still called a shaykik. The Gemara says, no, filo tem rabbanon. Over here, Rav Nachman can even agree to the rabbanon who hold by Shabbos, that's not a shaykik. But atkan lepliga rabbanon aleider munbaz elu b'chal terikula lav chidushu. It's only in kal terikula, which is not a chidush. Yeah, it's not a chidush. What's not a chidush? To bring a carbon. Aval hacha the chidushu. Why? The Gemara is going to explain. B'chal terikula ashkan lav damaisi carbon. Because in all of Torah you don't find that anything that's belav, b'mezid, you get malchus on, you bring a carbon b'shoigig, the alfinam avodah zara, because we learn all chayv v'chatois from avodah zara. They're just like avodah zara. B'mezid is karus, b'shoigig is a chatas. So to every avera in the Torah, you only bring a chatas b'shoigig on an avera that has karus b'mezid. So that's not a chiddush. So if it's not a chiddush, him not knowing it doesn't make him into a groise shoigig, because that's standard. Standard information. V'hacha maisi, but over here by Shevuos Bitoy, there's a chiddush in the Torah over here that Hagam b'mezid, it's not chorus, it's only a lav which is malchus. Still, b'shoigig you'd bring a carbon anyway. So such a type of chiddush. You bring a carbon b'shoigig on a lav, which is unusual. B'chala Torah kula, if you Rabbanan Moidu there, the Rabbanan are also agreeing to Rav Nachman that if you lack that piece of knowledge, that piece of information, that you bring a carbon b'shogig on this, you are still a shogig. Hagam, you know it's also to swear. Hagam, you know it's about the chakra. Okay, every day. Ein lecha, what does it say? Bismedrish b'loy chiddush, right? It's a big chiddush today. Boy menei ravina merava. Nishba al kikar u'mestakan aleho mahu. Guy makes a shavua. I'm not going to eat a loaf of bread, and he comes l'chlal sakana, and he's like mamish famished, and he's going to die if he doesn't have that piece of bread. Ma, what's the halacha? If he eats it, does he bring a carbon oil of yard? The Gemara says mistaken. Talk about pekuach nefesh. Lishur leimar. It's like a tchila you could have it. Avadi don't bring a carbon of that. Like a tchila, it's mutter.
Everything's mutter for
Right, everything is mutter for pekuach nefesh. Right, it's not one of the gimel chamuris we're talking about over here. We're talking about the Shevuos Bitoy. Right, we're talking about violating a Shavua. Avadi should do it. Hello, says the Gemara. We're not talking about pekuach nefesh at all. We're talking about a case of mitztair. A mitztair, he would have been mitztair if he wouldn't eat it. V'achla b'shigigas Shavua mai. What would be the halacha if he ate it b'shigigas Shavua? Is he chayav a carbon? Now, it's interesting. Rashi over here. What exactly is the case of mitztair v'achla b'shoigig? So Rashi explains that it's a case of mitztair, but even if he wouldn't be mitztair, he would still eat it b'mezid. Right? So it's a very unique case. Case is, you taka didn't know, you're taka shoigig. But if somebody would have told you, you would have done it anyway. So is that considered a shoigig enough to bring a carbon oil of a yard? Anytime you do an aveira, b'shoigig, but had somebody told you b'shas maisa that it's an isser, you would have followed through with the aveira, would have done it b'mezid anyway. Do you bring a carbon in such a case? Very interesting case. Okay. Question is, what does mitztair have to do with it? Right? Why is mitztair? What's the lashon? The Tosfos wants to know. What's the lashon of mitztair? The case is, a guy did a b'shagig and he would have done it b'mezid. That somebody told him would have done it b'mezid. What's the lashon of mitztair in the Gemara? Why is mitztair a necessary word in describing this case? Yeah, mitztair, not mitztair. The point is, the guy would have been amazed had he known. So Tosfos says a very interesting pshat that he's mitztair al ma she'eno shecheach shehirutzoino sheyishkach k'dei sheyochal. What does that mean? He's mitztair that he doesn't forget. He's doing it, but he's mitztair that in other words, he wishes he would have forgotten. If it was up to him, he would have forgotten so he can eat it. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what Tosfos says, so let's skip Tosfos for now. But Rashi says the case is, okay, the word mitztair Tosfos deals with, but the case is where he is eating it b'shoigig, he's taka a shoigig, but if somebody would have made him aware of it, he would have followed through b'mezid. Amar lei, so the Gemara says, Tanina, it's Mufresh Braisa. Shav mi yati osoi, mevi karbon shigigosoi. Lo shav mi yati osoi, mevi karbon shigigosoi. The Braisa says that only a type of shoigig that if he's informed that it's usr, he would be shav, he wouldn't do it. That's the type of shoigig you could bring a carbon on. But a type of shoigig that if you're telling him, or you would have told him and he still would have followed through with the aveira, ain't nevi carbon shigigasei. So it's first a brisa. You don't bring a carbon. That's not a shoigig. It's so interesting to me because, wow. That means that if somebody actually forgets, but hypothetically speaking, had he known, he still would have followed through. That's not a shaygig. But if somebody remembers and knows that it's amazing, you just don't know the consequence of a carbon, that's still a shaygig. It's very interesting. Okay. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Gomar beliboy tzarich sheyoytzi b'svasav, shenemar levate b'svasayim. If a person decides in his heart and mind that he's going to not eat a kicker, eat a kicker, right? Then he's not chayiv until he articulates it, verbalizes it, because it says levate b'svasayim. Shavuos is not chal only through bitas v'sayim. Meisavei asked the Gemara from a brayso, b'svasayim v'loy believe. State in the Torah b'svasayim, which means v'loy believe. Shavuos cannot be chal if you don't articulate it, you don't express it verbally. Gomer beliboy minayin. How do I know that's chal even if you don't express it verbally, even if it's believe? It's chal any which way, even gomer beliboy. Asks the Gemara, Agufa kasha. Amr b'svasayim v'loy believe. Other amr gomer beliboy minayin. Bryce is a contradiction, minei abei. In the beginning, it starts off with saying, how do I know that you have to articulate it? Because it says b'svasayim. And then it says, Gomer believe b'minayin. How do I know it works even if you don't articulate it? L'choy l'shavat adam b'shvua. Amr nafshesh zolei kasha. Hachi kamer. B'svasayim. V'loy shegomer beliboy lohoitzi b'svasa v'loy hoitzi. It doesn't help if you decided to express it verbally, but you haven't yet expressed it verbally. That wouldn't help. Gomer beliboy stam minayin. How do I know if it's Gomer beliboy stam? How do you know the Shevuos chal? Tamadam l'choy l'shiyavate. That's where it says l'choy l'shiyavate. So how's the Gemara answering the contradiction?
The whole question's weird because we say dvarim shabalev in dvarim.
True. In other words, why do we need a special pasuk by Shavuot?
Yeah,
dvarim shabalev in dvarim usually.
That's what I think, right? So that should apply to a Shavuot too. Be
when we have Dom Shalev and Dvarim, that's with regard to other people, right? In relation to other people. What about for yourself?
Right, for transactions. For
transactions, when you deal with other people, you can't expect somebody to read your mind. But what if it's maybe, yeah. But here we have a stira in the brisa. So how do you resolve the stira in the brisa itself, where it starts off with the b'svasayim v'loy shegomer beliboy, and then it's gomer beliboy menayin? So Rav Shesha says you have to interpret the brisa like this: b'svasayim v'loy shegomer beliboy lo hoitzi b'svasa v'loy hoitzi. That it doesn't help to be machlet, to articulate and express it, if you didn't follow through and expressed it. If you made up to express it verbally, then you have to follow through on that decision. But Gomer b'li b'stam, what if you just made up not to eat it? You never made an internal decision to express it verbally. Right? Menayin, how do you know that would help? That would be chal, even believe. Since in your mind you never made up to express it verbally, then you don't have to follow through on it in terms of expressing it verbally. But it would still be chal because you decided not to eat it. So how do I know? Okay, so the Bryce itself is not difficult. El Shmuel, kasha, but Shmuel, the Bryce is shver from, because the Bryce seems to say that if you're gomer b'li by stam, if you made up in your mind not to eat it, then it would be chal, right? Even if you didn't express it. It's only if you made up in your mind to express it verbally not to eat it, then you have to follow through on that decision. But if you just made up stam in your mind not to eat it, then that's chal. And Shmuel says it's not. He says that when the Brisa says b'svasayim, it's coming to exclude if you're gomer b'li b'loitzi paschitin v'oitzi pasa'orin. Then the shvuah is not chal. If there is a conflict between what the Gemira's das was and what the Hitzos b'svasayim was, that doesn't work. That's what the Bryce is coming to teach. Right? B'svasayim v'loy belev, which means whatever your moitzi b'svasayim wasn't the decision you made internally, then that doesn't work. But gomer b'liboy loitzi paschitin v'hoitzi pastam, right? If there was no obvious contradiction in the way you expressed it with what you decided internally, you decided paschit, and then you said pastam, not pasa'or, something completely different. Menayin, how do you know that works? That does work. But al kapanim, the way Shmuel understands the Brisa, Avad the Brisa agrees that you have to, in all cases, express a Shevuah verbally. Meisevei asks the Gemara another kasha in Shmuel, Moitzes v'sechet tishmoil v'osiso. It's a state, you should guard whatever comes out of your lips, and you should do it. Ein li elo shoytze b'sfasav. How do I know that even if you decided and you didn't articulate it, Talmud loymar koil nediv leiv. Nediv leiv means even if the nedava was in the leiv, it still wasn't expressed verbally. Says the Gemara, shani osam tichsich koil nediv leiv. No, by Hegdish, by Mishkan, when they raised the funds over there to build a Mishkan, that is different because it says mafurish there, koil nediv leiv. But you can't learn from there to everywhere else. No, why not? Learn from there to everywhere else that gemiras leiv, gemiras das works. Gemara says no, because you find this halacha of nediv leiv in two different places in the Torah, and the klal is that when the Torah singles out the halacha in two places, the Torah is singling it out in two places for a reason, to tell you only these two places have this unique halacha of nediv leiv, of gemiras leiv works by truma, hegdish, and kachim, and that's why you can't learn it to everywhere else. Gemara says, slow down. It's not so posh. Some say it is malamdin. So Gemara says it's true. Even if you say malamdin, shnei ksuvin is malamdin, but here it's different. Have a chulim v'kachim. V'chulim v'kachim, legamrinan. It's chulin and kachim. Those two cases are kachim, truma and kachim. And truma and kachim, it's more likely and makes more sense to say that gemiras leiv works as opposed to chulin. Now, why? Why taka? Why taka can't chulin kachim? Why kachim would have this chiddush and chulin won't? And I would venture to say, based on a Mahral, the Mahral talks about why machshava toiva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzaref l'maisa for a yid, even if he has machshava to do a mitzvah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers it as if it's done. By a goy, not so much, right? And the Mahral explains because a yid, his whole essence, inner desire is to fulfill the Ratzon Hashem, like the Rambam says by a get, right? If a person doesn't want to give a get, koifenais hachiyayim roitzani, right? What do you mean koifenais? It's oxymoronic. You force him until he says, I want. Teretz says, yeah, because every yid deep down wants. It's oisha be'isim akar, like the Gemara in Bracha says. So really, that's the DNA of a yid, right? He wants to come closer. He wants to do what's right. So when it comes to hektish, right? When it comes to truma, to kachim, to bring ourselves closer to Rebbeinu Shloim, if you have that thought and just like you decide in your mind, it's so organic, it's so natural to a yid that it's chal right away. It has that power even before you expressed it verbally. But when it comes to chulin, right? Yeah, I'm gonna eat ice cream, not gonna eat ice cream. That doesn't, that's not something that is coming from the deepest depths of your neshama, and therefore it's not as quick to be chal, believe until you express it verbally. Okay, I'll stop over here.